Okay, so welcome to our first weekly wellness workshop that we're doing in the New Year, New You holistic cleanse. We're going to be doing at least 5 weeks. For those of you who want to stick on, we might going to do a couple of weeks in addition on the end and see if we can potentially make some podcasts and see if we can make this a little bit of a longer term, more stable thing. But we're going to be doing at least 5 weeks. And today we're going to be starting with one of my favorite topics, which is habits, right? And the idea that you are what you consistently do. So before we get into that information, I want to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Nathan McCullough, and I am the head coach of this optimal wellness or holistic cleanse. We're going to have a number of other coaches that are going to be guiding you through some of the other weeks. But when it comes to the Facebook page and the content that's on the program, most of that will come from me. Um, so a little bit about who I am. So I am a health coach. I started about 2.5 years ago or so, and I run an international health and wellness company as well. So I have a health coaching business, and we run a nutritional product company. Um, so why I got into coaching or how I got into coaching, right? What life was like before I started coaching was I wasn't very healthy, really. I did exercise regularly, and I had the intention of being healthy. But before I started health coaching, I had a traditional business, and I was sort of a classic kind of workaholic, stressaholic. I was 100 miles an hour, speed freak type of person, type A driven type of person, and the culmination of the workaholicness and the stressaholicness culminated in my becoming an alcoholic. And I created the habit of using alcohol to really deal with stress in my own life, right? And got to the point where it was really making my own personal life unmanageable. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I found a company called USANA Health Sciences. I got married to a woman that wouldn't tolerate my nonsense anymore. And I found and enrolled in a course for health coaching, and I got really into personal development and health coaching, and really digging deep into the foundations of what creates habits. And I've at that point in time committed to a lifelong pursuit of the deconstructing what creates habits and how to create new ones. So this is a really, really passionate topic of mine. Um, and since sort of learning that technology, I have been able to create a life that's very happy, very healthy, very happy. I still work out regularly, but I've been able to install the habit of meditating regularly. I've been sober, and most importantly, and we'll talk about this a bit at the end, but cultivated the habit of having a deep love and compassion for myself. And what I'm most excited about on this program, and why I keep doing these holistic cleanses and will continue to do them, is I really want to use that experience of going through that process and that period in my life to positive impact the lives of other people by really teaching people the skill of healthy lifestyle modification and healthy habit reformation, so they can really create a life that they love in whatever way that may be. So that's a little bit about me. But in terms of the wellness workshop series, the focus is going to be on optimal living, and we're going to be focusing on optimal living at a holistic level. Okay, and what we mean by holistic level is we're going to be focusing on all of the different areas of your life. So this is not just a weight loss program or a simple detoxification program in terms of your diet, right? We're going to be focusing on how you can really become the best version of yourself in all the different areas of your life. So mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And the guiding question that I'm going to be constantly posing to you, and I want to keep in mind, sort of as an intention, is the question of how can I create a life well lived. So today we're going to look at what is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of creating a life well lived, and that is habits. So I really firmly believe that when you change your habits, you change your life, and that when it comes to creating consistent habits, that when you can alter what you consistently do on a daily basis, it's really your access to creating the best version of yourself and creating a life well lived, or what we're going to call optimal living. Right. So the focus is going to be on optimal wellness and how to create healthy habits in order to be able to do that. So one of my favorite quotes is by a guy that I deeply respect, John Maxwell, and he says that, hold on one moment. You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily, right? So the secret of your success is found in your daily routine. And every positive change in your life begins with a clear, unequivocal decision that you are going to either do something or stop doing something, right? So if you're going to change the quality of your life, you must change something that you do every day. And some of you know I have a background as a philosophy major, and Aristotle is always one of my favorite philosophers. And he's a Greek philosopher who taught 2,500 years ago, but he always talked about excellence. And he said that excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we act rightly. And so this is the slogan, is that we are what we repeatedly do. And the idea is that excellence is not really an act, but it's a habit. So if you look at the word arete, which translates literally in Greek. So when Aristotle says excellence, it's actually a kind of a clumsy translation of the Greek word arete, which literally taken means excellence or virtue. But when you look at it on a much deeper level, when you look at it in terms of what it looks like in the actual living of your life, what he was pointing at was the expression of the highest version of yourself, and really focusing on actualizing your full potential. And he really focused on arete as a moment by moment, a day by day phenomenon. And that's something that's always carried with me, and I think it's really critical to recognize that they thought about human being as the striving of your innermost potential, right? So the way that acorns strive to become trees, humans striving is to be the best version of themselves. So I find that to be really inspiring. So I want to talk about the intention of today. So in terms of what I really want you to take out of today is two things. One is really coming away with we're going to call it the keystone habit. And the keystone habit means it's the one thing that if you installed it in your life, it would make the biggest difference in your life. So that's the first intention. The second intention is that you walk away with some understanding of how to create the master habit of being able to install new habits so that you can repeat the process that we're going to talk about again and again and install new habits one by one in the future, right? So if habits are the access to living, is the access to a life well lived, then the habit of intentionally creating new habits is one of the most important things that you can do when you're designing your life. So I'm going to go over a number of different ideas in terms of how habits are created and how you can go about the process of creating new habits. And the first thing that I want to talk about is willpower. So I know a lot of people hear the word willpower, they've heard it talked about a lot. But willpower, in a lot of ways, is really the key to your success. So it's super important when you're creating sustainable results, particularly. So when they've done a lot of research recently on willpower, and they've seen that when it comes to willpower, it outpredicts IQ, for example, in academic performance by a ratio of 2. Right? So the ability to have willpower is the key determining factor when it comes to your ability to produce results. And it's one of the most important ways that you can increase the quality of your life is to learn how to intentionally boost willpower, right? Because it's really the fuel that determines the quality of your decisions. So I love the idea that you can actually create habits that help boost your willpower that then help you to create more habits in the future. And I'm a big, big believer and proponent in creating what they call upward spirals or positive feedback loops, which means you do things which then positively impact other things, which then positively impact other things. And you can really create some awesome momentum in your life. But when it comes to willpower, one of the first things we have to realize is that it is finite, right? So it's really important that we use our willpower wisely. So if you think about like every day when you wake up in the morning, right? You start off with just like your phone, right? You have a full willpower tank, if you will, right? So it's like your phone has full bars on your cell phone, right? And what happens is as you go through the day, as you make decisions all throughout the day, what happens is it drains your willpower. So you need willpower to make decisions. So when you make them, it gets drained throughout the day. And that's why you can be 100% sure that that what you're going to do or you're not going to do in the morning. Like, so if you wake up in the morning and you have 100% resolve, for example, that you're either going to do something or you're not going to do something, right? By the end of the day or by that nighttime, you can be pretty much guaranteed that your resolve when it comes to either doing or not doing that thing is going to be severely depleted. And that's why at nighttime, you find yourself much more susceptible to giving into your temptations is because your willpower bank has been depleted, right? So when it comes to creating sustainable willpower or creating habits that help you maintain your willpower, the biggest things that we're going to focus on throughout this 28 days are the habits of eating, moving, and sleeping. And what I call mental training. So when it comes to willpower, if you really want to make bad decisions, for example, when it comes to just bad decisions in general, let your blood sugar get too low. Right. This is one of the first things that we teach in health coaching is that the having irregular blood sugar, like blood sugar that spikes and dips, is one of the biggest problems that people have because it creates cravings. And when you're craving, it means that you're not in control of your decision making. So if you let your blood sugar go down too low, your brain will literally compel you to eat lots of different things in your environment that are not good for you and were not in the plan. One of the other things is movement, right? So when we're going to be doing whole weeks on eating, we're going to be doing whole weeks on movement, we're going to be doing whole weeks on sleeping. But movement is really a magic willpower booster, right? And we'll talk a lot more about that in following weeks. But another one is if you get a bad night's sleep, right? It's like drinking a 6-pack of beer the night before, right? Your willpower is going to be seriously diminished in the morning. And one of my favorite ways of boosting willpower, and this is a ton of scientific research been done on this, is meditation. And the research shows that meditation is really the best way to strengthen your prefrontal cortex, which is the home of the willpower muscle. So meditation is literally like going to the gym for your mind, and what it does is it helps strengthen your willpower. And then the last thing that is really tied to willpower is your breath. So if you want to really, really, really boost your willpower in any given moment, right, just take a deep breath in that moment, and it will immediately get you present and allow you to regain some willpower. So there's an amazing book called the Willpower Instinct by a woman named Kelly McGonigal, and she talks about a 4-to-6 ratio. So you inhale to 4, and you exhale to 6. And she has all this amazing evidence about how just doing a couple of repetitive breaths in that sequence can get you present. It reduces stress. And when your stress is reduced, it allows you to regain some of the willpower that maybe you've lost throughout the day. And she highlights that literally one breath can get you from out of a fight or flight response into what she calls the pause and plan response. So I just love that. And breath is an amazing way that you can create more willpower. And then on the flip side of that, basically the fastest way to destroy and kill your willpower is to shame yourself, right? So shaming is really the fastest way to destroy your willpower. And I'll focus a good bit on that as we close. But just know that when you're hard on yourself and you beat yourself up for doing things or not doing things, it's really the fastest way to kill your momentum and to kill your willpower, and to really cultivate the ability to love yourself. And self-compassion is a really great way of guaranteeing that you can stay in the groove. So as we go on, the key is really going to figure out how we can use our willpower to install habits that run on autopilot so that they no longer use willpower. Okay, so we'll talk about that as we go on. But when you have installed a habit is something that takes no willpower. So the key is to figure out what you want, begin to install the habit, and then once it's installed, it takes no more willpower. It's automatic, so that you can then go on and create new habits. So the next thing is really focusing on the fundamentals. So we touched on this a moment ago, but there's basically two levels to fundamentals, right? And winners don't just learn the fundamentals, they master them, right? And you really have to monitor your fundamentals constantly, because the only thing that changes will be your attention to them, right? So do you have your attention on the fundamentals, and do you know what they are? So we're going to make a very finite amount of fundamentals. There's going to basically two kinds: universal and individual. Right? Individual are the unique fundamentals that you need based on your own personal life. And the universals are eating, moving, sleeping, and either mindfulness or mental training. Okay, so we're going to unpack those during the following week. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those now, but just being mindful that fundamentals are really the key to the process. When you have your eating right, and you have your moving right, and you have your sleeping right, and you have your mindfulness right, everything else in your life really falls into place. And then there's also the individual or unique fundamentals that you have based on your profession, your passion, your goals, and your own individual lifestyle. So when it comes to habits, all of the research on habit formation that's come out in the last couple of years focuses on one key idea, and that is identifying what they call the keystone habit. And the keystone habit, or just the keystone in general, right? You can see it there on the diagram, is the stone that's in the middle and it locks in the arch, right? And without that keystone, the archway falls apart. So what we want to do is identify for your own life, right? And at the end of this session, I'm going to ask you to choose one and really commit for the full 28 days. But think for yourself, what is the one habit, the presence of which would make the biggest difference in the overall quality of your life, right? And when you work on one habit, and we touched on this a moment ago, but when you work on one habit, it actually impacts all the other areas of your life. So we don't want to focus on too many habits, right? We really ideally want to focus on one habit at a time until it's installed, and then you move on to the next one. Because what you're going to find is as you are working on that one keystone habit, it's going to have a ripple effect in the other areas of your life. Okay, so in this process, you really want to identify the keystone habit, commit to it 100%, right? And you really want to only choose this habit if it really fires you up, right? So when you're looking for the keystone habit, the things I want you to look for are the impact, right? What's the one that's going to have the biggest impact on you? Does it fire you up, right? Does having the presence of that in your life really inspire you? Right? And if so, I want you to commit 100%. Right? And this is one of the things that I learned in my own journey in terms of getting my drinking handled, and that is, and all of the research has shown this as well, that it's much easier to actually go all in than it is to dabble or to use moderation. And the biggest difference that they found in highly successful people is found in the difference between like 90 and 100%, right? What they find is that when you commit 100%, that that whiny little voice goes away, right? And it's literally already done in reality when you what they call burn the boats, when you cut off any alternatives, right? Tony Robbins talks about the idea of making a decision, which in the Latin means to cut off any other possibility. Then that thing is done before it even begins. So choose one thing, commit fully for 28 days. And then the next thing that we want to focus on is identifying your kryptonite. And by kryptonite, we mean what is the one habit that can literally bring it all down, right? What is that one bad habit or addiction that you have that if you removed it, it would have the biggest impact on your life? And this is really critical because before you really plant the seeds of what you want in your life, you have to spend some time getting really honest with yourself, doing some self-appraisal and some real honesty, and pull out the weeds of what's not serving you and what's not working as well as you'd like it to in your own life. Because the reality is you can plant the most amazing seeds or habits in the world, but if the moment you get stressed out or your blood sugar dips, or whatever the case may be, you do something crazy, which is like your kryptonite, then it's like planting a garden and then ripping out all the seeds before they actually take root. Okay, so one of the things that you might do is ask some people that are in your life, right? What are some of the things that they can see? Because a lot of times our kryptonite, right, the one thing that really holds us back in terms of creating what we want is a blind spot, right? It's something that we can't really see. Um, and once you do see it, you can it immediately, it's like, how could I have not seen that? It's like the most obvious thing in the world. But the way that our subconscious mind is created, and the way that our mechanism is that we like to really block ourselves off from seeing the things that have the biggest impact on us. So my advice here is to create a stop a stop doing list, right? Or maybe ask the people in your life, what is it that you would like to see me stop doing? And then make a list of those things, and then identify the number one thing that if you took it away would have the biggest impact. Again, that you've fired up if you didn't have that in your life. So if there's something you're really fed up with, and you'd be really fired up if it was gone, that's a really good place to start. And then again, 100% commitment for 28 days. Go all in, commit to removing that thing from your life. I know for me, when I really had a deep look and I identified that when I looked at all the things that I didn't really like about what was going on in my life at that time, I realized that all of them were related to, in some way, my relationship to alcohol. And when I identified that as the one thing that I wanted to remove from my life, what emerged was, how do I make myself strong enough to be able to do that? And that's when meditation really came into my life and has had a enormous impact on my life. So I created the habit of meditation, which in a lot of ways actually led into my habit of nutrition as well, my obsession with optimizing my diet, which then led into my decision to become a health coach. So for me, that's what happened way back then. Was I did identify my kryptonite, and I realized that I had so many things that were going for me, and I was amazing in so many different ways. But this is the one thing that was holding me back. I removed that, and then that led into a couple of amazing habits that really are the staple of my life now. So the next thing that you want to identify is your why. So once you have the keystone habit and you have the kryptonite that you want to remove, one of the most important things to begin to do is creating and visualizing a very clear and very present vision for why you want that in your life. So begin to picture what your life would be like, 1, 3, 5 years from now, if you were able to have that habit take root in your life, or you were able to remove the bad habits from your life, and really think about for yourself, what does your life look like? What's present in your life, what's not present in your life, and what's really, really important about that with you. And if you have a partner, I would really love, when we're finished here today, is to go through a process of just asking each other. In health coaching, they call it your big MOFA, or your big why. It's the why underneath of the why. And the way that you go about it is that you actually ask, what's important about that to you? And then when you come up with an answer, you just keep asking that question. What's important about that? Right? Until you drill down to, usually, if you do this fully and you're authentic and you're vulnerable in this process, when you get down to a really base level reason for why you want that in your life, it will move you to tears. You will get emotionally connected in a very powerful way to something that can create a level of motivation that you've never had before. So I really encourage you to work on your big why. And there's a woman that has been really impactful for me. Her name's Michelle Seeger. We'll talk about her a lot in this program. But she's an American behavioral, she calls herself a sustainability scientist, but she's wrote a number of books. She's an amazing speaker, and she's known for her research on how to create automatic and sustainable motivation. And she focuses mainly on exercise and self-care behaviors, but it's really, really incredible. And what she does is she has something called your best self diary, and it's proven that if you can create a future that you're really excited about, and then you can tie it back into the immediate moment, that you're much more likely to make a sustainable habit. So you create that visualization, you get really excited about it, and you visualize it until you can feel it, you can see it, you can smell it, and then you use something to tie it back into an immediate benefit in the present moment, with the habit that you're creating, and it creates an amazing amount of leverage for installing that habit right now. And she talks about in a book called what is it? It's called No. She's got a number of books, but there's a book called No Sweat, where she actually works on the science of creating meaning. And she says in that book that there's actually a right and a wrong way of finding your why in behind your actions. And the wrong way is having really abstract long-term goals, right? So a lot of people will start to cleanse and they say they want to lose weight, they want to feel better, or a lot of people say they want more money, things like that, right? And they're generally very ineffective, right? Because it doesn't create motivation in your present. And what she's found is that what creates motivation is something immediate. So something immediately present in the goals that you have right now that's tied to an emotion, right? So if you know, for example, that you like how you feel when you work out, or you know that you feel lighter when I eat good, or I feel more energized when I meditate, right? You take that longer term goal and you figure out a feeling that you have in a present, and you anchor that in the present moment. And what that does is it allows for you to create sustainable motivation, because human beings are actually hardwired for immediate gratification. So what she teaches is to actually use that default mechanism of immediate gratification in order to help you create long-term goals. And we'll talk more about that in the weeks as we go, but I find that to be really important. So the next thing is making sure that your consistency is really the key to this whole thing, right? So doing it daily. And when you're first starting a new habit, it has to be a daily process. It's not something that you want to be doing every once in a while, right? Because consistency is really what breeds trust. You'll trust yourself, and what has other people trust you, right? So you want to pick a habit that you will do every day for 28 days. Not Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You are what you repeatedly and consistently do every single day. And that's really how you create what we talked about earlier in terms of a positive feedback loop. Is consistency is what gives you the evidence that you need to really begin to trust yourself. And trust is trust in yourself, and it's also trust from others, right? And that's really ultimately what creates in integrity, is that trust in yourself, in that positive feedback loop. So consistency gives you evidence that you need to trust in yourself, which then creates for yourself a life of integrity. So when it comes to how to build that, I like to make it easy, right? So the formula is don't skip a day. Right? When you're in the beginning stages of habit formation, don't skip a day. Pick something that you can do every single day. And if for some reason you do miss a day, definitely don't skip 2 days, right? Or otherwise, you actually should just start over, right? So you want to practice compassion in this process, right? So in this program, progress is perfection. But when you're doing this, you want to make sure that it's something that you can do every single day. If you do screw it up, it's not a big deal. Just start over again. But if you really want to effectively install the habits, um, follow the formula. Don't skip a day. If you do, definitely don't skip 2 days. Um, in a book by Tynan called The Superhuman by Habit, he talks about this a lot, and he says that if you do miss a day, make sure that whatever habit that you're installing at that time frame is the number one thing that you do the next day, right? So the number one thing on your to-do list for the next day is the habit that you're doing, right? Because your default will kick in and you're not going to want to do it. So you really have to prioritize the habit. The second thing is or the next thing is making it easy. Okay, so this process is already difficult, right? So when it comes to this process, you want to really simplify it as much as possible, because the compound effect is something that is active in our life every single day, right? So small daily improvements are really the key to unbelievably staggering long-term results, right? So what you want to do is incrementally build your habits, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a life-changing habit. So the decision is made in a moment, right? We talked about that before. When you commit 100%, that's made in a moment, but roots are cultivated by watering them every single day, right? So for me in my own life, I'm working on the habit of meditation, right? So, but even if I get to the point where I'm meditating, 30, 60 minutes of every single day, depending on the schedule, you don't start off by just saying, okay, I'm going to meditate every day for an hour, right? You're just setting yourself up to fail. So in the beginning, it's not really the distance of the run or the amount of the words that you want to write on the page or the number of minutes that you meditate, right? In the beginning, it's the compounding of repetitions every single day that make the difference. So it's more important that you do it every day than how much you're actually doing, right? We've all heard the phrase that you have to crawl before you walk, and you have to walk before you run. So that's really one of the keys, is making these little mini habits, right? That they're mini habits that are too small to fail, right? In the habit, Superhuman by Habit, he talks about his goal is to do 100 push-ups a day, right? So he starts off doing one push-up a day in the beginning, and then he just adds one push-up every single day. And I can't remember the exact time frame, but he gives an exact time frame where he's literally doing 100 push-ups a day, by starting with one. Right? So the key is start small, start, like, I think he calls it stupid simple, right? Start stupid simple, and help yourself create that momentum. And if you look at, he talks about Newton's third law, or first law, right? So an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? So the hard part is getting started. Once you get started and get the momentum going, at some point it becomes easier to keep going than it is to stop going, right? So the key is just do it in the beginning. So start small, incremental growth, and create that momentum that creates sustainable habits. This is the book that really set it all off for me. It is a book called The Habit, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he talks about if-then and triggers, and how to create habit change, which is you have cues which literally tell you, kick in, and the brain has an automatic mode, which tells it what habit to use. And those cues create routines, whether they're physical, mental, or emotional. You have an emotional or physical or mental response to that trigger or that cue, and it's anchored by a reward, which is a prize telling your brain that this work that so this loop tells your brain that this loop is worth remembering in the future. So you can literally create these habit loops.
Hi, I'm Brian Dixon, USANA's Executive Director of Health and Science Education. A habit is an action you perform without thinking much about it. For example, washing your hands after you go to the bathroom or putting on your seatbelt when you get into the car. Creating a habit is the easiest way to incorporate healthy changes into your life because once you've created a habit, it doesn't take your brain any additional work to remember it. To create new, healthy habits, use cues in your everyday life to trigger that new habit you want to form. For example, if you want to remember to take your supplements morning and night, a good cue might be to take your supplements before or after brushing your teeth. If you want to get into the habit of meal prepping on Sunday, maybe your cue would be to start cutting up the veggies after you put in a load of laundry. If you want to exercise after work, your cue might be to leave your packed workout bag in the passenger seat of your car. Remember, first you have to mindfully establish the healthy habits you want to create and the cues that will help guide you to them. So yes, it does take discipline to get started, but after a few weeks of incorporating that discipline into your life, you'll automatically begin taking those healthy actions you want, and it will be easier to remember. So I challenge you to take 1 minute right now to write down the healthy habit that you will incorporate into your daily routine along with the action that will trigger it. So go ahead, I'll wait.
So I love that because that's Brian Dixon, who's he's the head of the research and development at USANA, but he really nails it on the head there in terms of how to create this. So, if you want to, the biggest thing so when I wanted to really start exercising every single day, I learned this from Tony Robbins actually, but he says if you want to exercise every single day, put your gym bag together the night before and sit it in front of your door, right? Or put it in a place where as soon as you wake up, it's the first thing that you see. Because what happens is it literally creates a trigger that creates a routine, right? And if like Michelle Seeger said, that you feel good when you work out, or you feel grounded, or you feel peaceful, you feel calm, that's the reward. So you can use the bag in front of the door in order to create the cue, which then creates the routine of exercising, and then intentionally anchor in that reward. And you can intentionally create really powerful routines that can help you creating an awesome life. So one of the last things is embracing the process. And this is so important, right? So when you embrace the process, then you can really begin to embrace the progress. And it's really only when you're able to embrace and focus on the progress that you're making that you can really then go back and begin to embrace the process, because the process involves pain. It involves failure. It involves shortcomings. It involves, the little voice in your head telling you you're not good enough. But if you can create a habit of focusing on the progress that you're making, then it allows you to really embrace the process, which is so important for being able to continue on, right? And the reality is that it's taken you, regardless, however old you are, right? It's taken you years to burn grooves into your brain and your subconscious mind to have specific habits that run basically on autopilot, right? So you cannot change them in an instant. right? So you have to, from before you even begin, just embrace the fact that it's taken a long time for you to have the habits that you have now. It's going to take some time to decondition them and create new habits. So just know that from the very, very beginning. And there's a guy named Hal Elrod. He's amazing. He was introduced to me by one of my favorite health coaches, Julie Riesler, and he wrote a book called Miracle Morning. And it's amazing in that book because you hear so many people talk about it, but it's really true that nothing great happens outside of your comfort zone, and that when you really begin to believe in yourself, you become literally unstoppable. But he talks about the three phases of the process of creating new habits. Okay, so he talks about them in 30 days. Research actually shows that if the habit is really complex, it can take considerably longer than that. So if you have an addiction to alcohol, or if you have an addiction to sugar, if you have an addiction to you know validation or anything like that, that's a little bit more complex. It can take longer, but generally speaking, 30 days. But the concept still applies in what he talks about in the book. And the three phases are, the first one is it's unbearable, right? When you decide that you're going to do something with a sort of an idealist vision of what it's going to look like and be like, and it's really, really different to what's already going on in your life. It's very disorienting, and you can actually experience a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction and displeasure in your brain, right? And that's usually what creates thoughts like, this was stupid, why did I do this in the first place, this was a terrible idea. And a lot of times we will tell ourselves, I didn't even want this in the first place, right? If you have that thought, but you've really done the groundwork that we've talked about up until now, just know that that's the little critical voice in your head playing tricks on you, right? You see that happen to a lot of kids when they first start, right? They get really excited about doing something. They start, and then they fail once, and they decide that they didn't really want it in the first place, right? That's how dreams are killed. In the second phase, he talks about the idea of uncomfortable, right? So you go from unbearable to uncomfortable. And at this phase, it creates some sort of discomfort, as it's still outside of what your brain associates as normality, what you do normally. But the key is, at this stage, you're beginning to see results. And because you're beginning to see results, it's now actually easier to keep going than it is to stop, right? And we call that getting over the line, right? Where you're buy-in in such a way, like you've put in enough time and energy and pain, and you've persisted for long enough that it's actually easier to keep going than it is to quit. And it would actually cause more pain to quit than it would to keep going. That's why when they talk about declaring your intentions, right, telling people what you're doing and creating that external leverage where people know what you're doing, and you don't want to be embarrassed to stop. It's really good in the beginning, actually, because if it's just up to you and nobody knows, a lot of times you'll just give in. But if you have that external pressure, you can help it to get you through this unbearable, this uncomfortable stage, until you get to stage 3, which he talks about being unstoppable, right? And when you get to phase 3, he says people literally cannot pay you to stop doing the habit, right? You have way too much reference experience or evidence for how awesome it feels in your life, and you literally begin to forget what life was like before the habit change, right? So if you've ever really gone through one of these major shifts in your life, then you go through phases in your life where it's actually hard to remember what it was like back then, right? That's when you get to that unstoppable stage and you have installed the new habit. It's running on autopilot, and your subconscious mind has accepted that habit as the truth for you. And anything else would, at that point in time, become unbearable, right? And at that point, you literally have become, you've literally come full circle. So at that stage, we talked about this earlier, but at that stage, it takes absolutely no willpower at all at that point. And then you can use your newly renewed willpower bank to go back and create a new habit. So that's really the game that we want to play, is to sort of go along that process and sort of one by one establish and install new habits, right? So that's the game you want to play, but you really have to embrace the process, right? You're going to have to embrace beforehand that you're going to go through that phases, so that when you're going through them, your brain knows this is just part of the process, right? So don't expect it to be easy. It's not going to be easy, right? And you just have to really remind yourself along the way that this is the way that it's designed. And if it was easy, right, everybody would have these extraordinary lives, right? But it's not easy. It's going to take something. And that is in one of my favorite books of all time called Mindset by Carol Dweck. She talks about that as a growth mindset, which means when you get to that point, you really have the view of challenges as something that are fundamentally good. Failing becomes something that's good, because without it, you couldn't get stronger. Last, but almost last, but definitely not least, really, I think probably the most important thing is the master habit of belief, right? And it's really all about cultivating that growth mindset and the belief that you can do it, right? What we know is that all behavior is belief driven. Underneath of every behavior is a belief, right? It may be unconscious, it may be conscious, but unbelief underneath every behavior is a belief. You can actually stop and ask yourself, based on what I'm doing right now, or based on what someone else is doing right now, what do they have to believe in order for them to be behaving that way? And you'll actually get to the source of what's driving that. But you have to master the habit of simply believing in yourself and believing that all habits are fundamentally changeable. Even if you can't believe in yourself yet, the most fundamental belief that's critically important, that they've shown scientifically, is the belief that it is possible, that you can change regardless of whatever it may be. And there's an age-old phrase from Henry Ford, that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Right? So a lot of people have heard that before, and it may sound cliche because you've heard it 1,000 times. But there's a book that I read recently called, or I listened to the audiobook recently called Make It Stick, and it's on the science of successful learning. And in that book, they actually say that there is a tremendous amount of wisdom in that wit. And the reality is that if you don't think you can change your life, you can't change a habit, then you actually can't, for real, period. Like, you cannot change it if you don't believe that you can. So, like we said, all behavior is belief driven. You must master the habit of believing in yourself, and more importantly, believing that all habits are fundamentally changeable. So in Make It Stick, they found that if you embrace and truly believe that all habits are malleable, then they actually are, right? So it's important because if you say, for example, right, I just want to make it a little bit more concrete, right? So if you say that you want to stop smoking, or you want to stop drinking, or you want to start going to the gym, or you want to, whatever it is, you want to do X, Y, and Z, but secretly or subconsciously, there's a thought underneath of that you don't believe that you can, you will actually never fully commit and do whatever it takes in order to make that happen, right? And a lot of times you'll give up on the first or second failure. The first, as you begin to experience failure, you'll give in. And it really prevents people from creating what they really want, because without them knowing it, they don't have access to really giving in, to going all in, because logically speaking, your brain would never allow you to do something fully that you didn't believe was the truth. So that's something to really look at for yourself. And I love this, right? So if you look at a failure is just the first attempt in learning, right? Students aren't expected to get everything right the first time, right? They get feedback or support on how to improve, and then they redraft their work and they make it better each time, right? So I call this developing an experimenter's mindset, or a learning mindset. Like it involves a childlike wonder and a willingness to just experiment and have fun in life, right? So if you look at an experimenter, right, they don't get upset, they don't get their panties in a bunch when something doesn't go the way that they hoped, right? And the reason for that is because they're not hoping, right? They're not attached to the outcome. They're just trying. And in that process, when you develop that experimental or that growth mindset, failure is looked at as a fundamentally positive thing, because it all it does at that point is it gives you the data that you need, that you can use to attempt the process again with more confidence that you can actually follow through the next time. And if you fail that time, it's just more data that you can use to start again more wisely. So that creates a positive loop as well. And the key there is that there's no emotional attachment, right? You're literally just trying things out. And I can't remember who said it, but in that framework, right, in that mindset, then there's only winning and learning, right? There is no losing. It's not personal at that point, right? And that's when you really get that childlike approach to learning, where you're not tethered to or determined by the past, right? You're literally just open in the present, trying on new things. And last but not least, is it a game? Game or shame, right? I am in love with the phrase that you have everything you need and you are enough. That's something that I used to use as a mantra for myself in my everyday life when I was going through periods of time where I wanted to give up, and things were really hard. I just instilled the belief that I had everything I need and that I am enough. And there's I can't remember her name now, but she's got a company called Mind Valley, and she says that the most destructive belief in the world is that we're not enough. And so many people have that belief on some level, and as you're going through this process of habit formation, as you're going through this 28 days and on in your life, I think the most powerful habit that you can create is the power of really loving yourself, and getting away from the habit that so many people have of shame, in the loop of shame. And if you want a really powerful exposition on shame, there's a woman named Brene Brown who has become one of my real mentors in life. She's got a book called Daring Greatly. She's got a book called Rising Strong. She's got a book called The Power of Vulnerability. And she's got a TED Talk on shame. And it's just really powerful, the habit of shame that we have in our life and how destructive it is in our stopping us and holding us back from creating what we want. So the key here is really not to just don't beat yourself up when you make when you make mistakes, right? You don't make yourself wrong. There's an awesome book called Crazy Good by a guy named Steve Chandler, who says that it's actually a choice, right? Are you going to pursue a life with the mentality of a game or a shame attitude? And there's another woman named Christine Neff, and then she wrote a book called Compassion that says, when you fall down, which you're going to do a lot, you have to cultivate the habit of self-love and and compassion for yourself. And when you have that fundamental belief that it's all a game anyway, then the attitude is, then why not just play with it and see what you can create, and that really it creates a really playful attitude. I know that my mom's been a huge source of inspiration for me in terms of constantly creating the possibility of bringing joy into her life, and I think that that's a big part of that process as well. And in that mindset, you're focused on the process and not on the outcome, right? It's more about learning and growing than it is about getting it right. And we touched on this earlier, but really, shame is the number one way to destroy your willpower and really kill any opportunity for you to create good habits or to create goals and an impassioned vision for your life. So cultivate the self-love and compassion for yourself if you want to stay in the game. And you really, it gives you the ability to look at just objectively what's working and what's not working without really taking it personally. So those are really the keys when it comes to habit. I know that's a lot of information. I really encourage you to maybe go back and watch this again. But if you get nothing out of today, right, the homework that I want you to really take on is, number one, identify your keystone habit. What's the one thing that, if you had it present in your life right now, would have the biggest impact on your life, right? Identify that, commit to it 100%, and go all in for 28 days. Create that habit. Second thing, make a what's not working list, right? As we said earlier, maybe do that with a partner. One of the things that you can ask people that are close to you in your life is, what are the three things that I talk about the most, right? Even if you're a super positive person, a lot of times what we talk about most are, being tired or not wanting this and that in your life, right? So maybe make a list of things to stop doing, and then identify the number one thing that you're going to give up, that you're going to detoxify from your life in this 28 process. Identify the impact, and then commit to it 100%, and then visualize what your life would look like in 3 years with these two things, and really begin to feel into that. Go create a little bit of a meditative space where you can stop, slow down, do some deep breathing exercises, do some meditation, and begin to really visualize what your life would look like, what it would feel like, what it would smell like. Really make it real and present for you in the moment, and commit to it 100% for there's 21 days left on this program, but really commit to it for 28 to 30 days. And then once you've identified what those things are, please share them on the Facebook page for our New Year, New You group. We put up information on there every single day, motivation videos. People are sharing their recipes. I put the meal plan up there for those of you who are maybe just starting in the program. Everything is there on the Facebook page. So please create the habit of actually checking the Facebook page every day, because I promise you there will be something there that can help you in this process. So motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. So I love you all, and I wish you the best on this program. And please keep engaged with us on the Facebook page, and good luck.